So welcome this evening. We are going to talk about handball. This is a recurring theme for us. The last time we talked about it at on an entry-level webinar was back in August of 2019. So it's been about 7 months, I believe, since if my math is right, since we last talked about handball. We've talked about it in a couple of other platforms as well. The grassroots webinars talked about it a couple of times now, and the regional referee webinars have talked about it at least once now. But I thought it would be good to revisit this. I got a little bit of additional training myself at a seminar recently where they broke it down a little bit differently for us, and I thought it was helpful myself. And so I thought I would share that with you this evening, as well as some additional and new clips that y'all haven't seen before. So getting into that, we'll talk about handball, and we'll spend most of our time this evening looking at clips. And I will be launching a poll for you to vote after we've gone through the technical stuff on each clip so that you can make the decision for us. So here we go. From the current laws of the game, I'm going to do a quick summary. My computer's freezing. So we already know this part. It's an offense if a player deliberately touches the ball with their hand or their arm, including moving the hand or arm towards the ball. So we know if someone deliberately handles the ball, that it's an offense. We already know that. There's nothing new to that. There's no real additional insider observation I can offer you there. If they move their hand toward the ball, then it's probably going to be a handball. So we're going to skip through that. We're not going to look at any video. I think we are actually, sorry. And then from part of the law as well is gain possession or control of the ball after touch their arm, particularly if they're an attacker. So for attackers, we have a new law that if they're in the attacking third and the ball hits the hand or the arm, even unintentionally, even if they don't do anything wrong, and they score a goal, they get a goal scoring opportunity. We need to blow the whistle. So there's almost two categories of handball now. There's what happens when attackers accidentally touch the ball with their hand, even if they don't do anything wrong. We still are going to call handball because the law has changed it now. We don't want to see good attacking opportunities created from even accidental handballs. And then there's what we do for defenders and everybody else. And that's where we get into deliberately touching the ball with the hand or the arm. Specifically, though, for this, we need to see the hand or the arm move towards the ball. So a couple of examples here, and they'll go through these quickly because these are just things we've already seen before and talked about. So we're going to look at a couple of examples where a defender very deliberately moves the hand towards the ball. So we can see here this defender, when he starts, his body's up, and then as the ball goes by, he leans in, puts his arm out, and obviously makes contact. So there we see a very, very clear motion. You can see it in the camera angle from behind, a very clear motion where he goes out of his way to make his arm hit the ball. Clear handball situation. Another example. Again, it'll be easier to see on the replay. Again, you see a defender very clearly and deliberately swing his hand out to block the ball. You can see it on this replay in particular. Watch the left hand as the ball goes by, reaches out, slaps it down. Clear handball. Again, another example of a player moving his hand or arm towards the ball very deliberately. Last example. And this is a subtle one, but you'll see it here on the replay. Just sticks his elbow out there at the end. Very deliberate action. You can see his arm is down by the side. And watch that little elbow come out. Doop, right there. Makes an obvious move towards the ball. So these are the handball decisions that are a little bit easier. We can see the clear action of the arm or the hand towards the ball. There's no real argument about it because the player has done something very, very visual. Where we're going to spend more of our time analyzing this evening are those situations where it's usually an offense, in particular when the hand or arm has made the body unnaturally bigger. These are the ones that are really, really difficult to get because we have to talk about what does a natural position mean? How do we know if they meant to do it or not? You know, those are all the things we've been talking about for a number of years now. The idea of the body being unnaturally bigger is not new. That's something we've had in our lexicon for a number of years now. But I'm going to share with you a couple of different considerations that might help you a bit when you're trying to make these decisions. So, and this is the new framing of this that I was presented with about 6 weeks ago that has helped me with this. And so I figured it would be helpful for you as well. So a couple of new considerations. One, is the arm creating a barrier for the ball or the opponent? That's a big one. If the arm is creating a barrier of some kind, then that's something that we want to consider guilty of a handball. Secondly, if the hand of the arm is outside the normal playing silhouette. So when we talk about the silhouette, what we're talking about is the normal body cavity of the person, right? So, you know, people are born with arms. There's nothing they can do about it. We don't want them to cut it off so that they get to play soccer. So we're really trying to look at if a player keeps his arms within the normal playing silhouette of his body, no matter if it touches the arm or not, we don't want to call a handball. But if the arm is outside of that playing silhouette, out to the sides or out away from the body, then we want to consider that to be an unnatural position, and we want to look for handball situations in those circumstances. So as we go through the next little bit, and we're going to start looking at clips pretty much right away, I want you to think about these two things and these two things only. Is the player creating a barrier for the ball or the opponent? And is the hand or the arm outside the normal playing silhouette? And to get into that a little bit further, if a player is trying to keep their arms tucked to the body, we don't want to punish them for that. So if they are making an effort to keep their hands or their arms close to their body, we don't want to go looking to punish that. We want to look for the players who have their arms outside away from their body, stretched out to the sides. Obviously there's parts of the law about above the shoulder, but really, are they sticking their arm out? Are they creating a barrier, or are they tucking their arms in close to the body, or is the arm just naturally hanging close to the body? So those are the only things I want you to think about as we start to go through and watch these videos. Last thing here, distance doesn't matter. So for all these things we're talking about, it doesn't matter how quickly or how close the ball comes from. That used to be a big factor for us. We would oftentimes say, well, the player didn't have time to react to it because it came from such a short distance, so therefore we can't punish them. What we're now moving toward, and this was the distinction that I had made for me, is less intent and less ability to react and more fact-based and outcome-based. If the player has his arms in a normal, close to the body position, then they should be worry-free about being called for handball. However, if they choose to have their hands out away from their body, they're taking that risk themselves by having their hands out away from the body. And if the ball hits their hand, even if they didn't mean for it to, they are still going to be punished for handball because they took the risk of putting their hand and arm outside of that normal playing silhouette. So as we go through these clips and as you start to analyze these out on the field when you're making decisions, the idea of how far the ball traveled to get there is irrelevant now. We don't really want to worry about that. We want to focus only on where was the arm in relation to the body. And if it was close and tight to the body, we don't want to have handball. If it's away from the body, we do want to have handball. Any questions on that concept? Because that's kind of a key concept for the rest of the video work that we're going to do. So I want to pause for a moment, and if anybody has any questions, please write them now. Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and move us along. And we'll just look at some videos. If you have questions as we watch these videos, no problem. Just ask and I'll answer them. So we had a question here. What if the ball comes straight from the head or the foot to the arm in a natural position, but away from the body? That's a very different question. We're not going to cover those this evening. So good question, well thought through. We're not going to cover that specifically this evening. What we're looking at today is just handball situations where the arms are away from the body. So here's the first video.
When you came here, right?
Watch it one more time. All right. So I'm going to launch a poll here. You make the decision. Should this referee deem this a handball offense? Give you a few more seconds to vote. All right. Here's the results. About 70% of you say, yes, this should be a handball. About 22% say, no, this is within the natural silhouette. And a couple of people, 6, actually say, no, no time to react to it. So again, I want to reemphasize first with the 6 people who said no time to react. I just got done saying we don't want to consider how far the ball travels to get there. If it's close or if it's far away, none of that is relevant. So no time to react is not a consideration that we're going to worry ourselves with. Really what we're going to focus on is what position did the player put his arms in, and did that result in a handball offense? So when we look at this, we can see already when the player goes in to block this shot, his arm is straight out to the side. This we would consider not within the silhouette of the body. His arm is out to the side. And as the ball travels to where he has put his hand, out to the side, away from the body, you can see it hits his hand here. This needs to be considered out away from the body. If his arm is tucked in here along the side and it hits the back of his arm, then yeah, we would not want to punish him for handball. But here the arm is out, extended away from the body here. You can see a big bunch of space between his hand and his body, out away from the body. We would want to consider this a handball. We're going to see a lot of examples today. So next clip. Play it one more time. I'm going to give you one more replay of it here. All right. I'm going to launch the poll again. Let's see what you got. Should the referee deem this a handball offense? So while everybody is voting, we had a question here. Do we still look at whether the arm moves back from the impact of the ball or not? Not really, actually, Leah. That's a good question. We used to think about, we were talking about, is it a deliberate action or is it not a deliberate action? And one of the ways that we would try to determine if it was a deliberate action was if their hand got hit by the ball and swung backwards. That meant they didn't have their arm flexed, which means they didn't mean to put their hand there. It wasn't a deliberate action. We're trying to move away now from trying to guess intent and instead just look at the simple facts. Where was the arm? Did they have a risk at putting their arm where they did, regardless if they did it deliberately? So the idea of does the ball knock the hand away was us trying to figure out was that deliberate or not. Now we don't have to worry about that. We can just say, did the arm create a barrier, and was the arm outstretched from the body? That makes it a lot more simple for us. Does that make sense, Leah? All right, so here are the results. 99% of us say this is a handball, so good. I started with two easy ones. We learned from the first one. Now we're on to the second one. As you can see here, when the player's running up to block the ball, he has his left arm directly out to the side, and the player kicks the ball, and it hits this player in the side. Or sorry, the arm out to the side. So this is definitely outstretched from the body, not within the silhouette. Excellent job on getting that decision correct. Question here, if the hand was near the body and the ball hit the hand on a scoring chance, would it be a handball? Devin, I need you to clarify that question for me a little bit. Are we talking about, does it hit the hand of an attacker or does it hit the hand of a defender? Can you please clarify that for me? Of a defender. So if we're talking about defensive handball, if the hand is near the body, then we don't want to call a handball. So if the hand is near the body of a defender, we don't call a handball. Now, if it's an attacker and he's got his hands in a normal position and everything's okay, then we still have to call a handball because we don't want to see attacking opportunities created from a handball. So in this scenario, if the hands are by the sides and it's a defender, then we don't punish defenders who keep their hands by their sides. Question here, in the first example, the player was turning, which caused his arm to be flung out of his silhouette. The silhouette changes. The silhouette needs to be considered the core of the body. The what's the word I'm looking for? The chest, the legs, the core of your body. That needs to be considered the silhouette, center mass of your body. The arms, if they're next to the core, no problem. If they stretch out to the side, then you have a problem. Torso, thank you, Leah. That's the word I was looking for. The torso of the body needs to be considered as the silhouette. And if they stretch the arms out away from that silhouette, now you have a handball situation. All right, moving us on to the next one. A little bit more complicated on this one. So it's important to note we are not worried about his left arm because the ball actually doesn't hit his left arm. Instead, when you see it from behind, the ball actually hits his right arm right there. So knowing that, please watch it live one more time. And I will launch the poll. Few more seconds. Still a full third of our participants not voting, which means some of us don't want to be in a situation where we have to make this decision. All right, I'll go ahead and end it. So we have 80% of you say, yes, the referee should deem this a handball. 3% say no time to react. And another 14 people say no, the hand is within the natural silhouette. So again, I want to reemphasize for those who voted there's no time to react to it. The considerations that we talked about at the beginning of the webinar, distance is no longer a factor. All we're focused on is, did the hand or the arm create a barrier? And is the hand outside of the silhouette? How far the ball traveled to get there is irrelevant. We don't care about that anymore. So we had 14 people say that this is a good example of a hand being within the natural silhouette. Everybody else on the call says that this is a handball. So at this moment right here, we have to ask ourselves, is the arm close to the body or away from the body? That's the only question we have to ask ourselves here. Is the arm tucked into the body, next to the silhouette, or is it outstretched away from the body? And this is about the most extreme example I can think that I can find of an arm that is outstretched away from the body when it makes contact with the hand. So I know a lot of people will say, oh, hey, that's a natural motion for someone who's trying to block a shot. We don't care about those things anymore. We care about, did the arm create a barrier? And was the hand away from the silhouette? And in this case, this is clearly an example of an arm being extended away from the silhouette of the body, which means we would need to have a handball. So we have a question here. What if he uses the arm for balance? Doesn't matter. If he puts the arms out to the side, he is taking a risk by putting his hands there. So there's a couple people saying it hit his other arm, or they thought it hit his left arm. I actually went through very, very clearly and said, we are not worried about the left arm in front. It hits the back arm. So I gave you that information. So you need to listen more carefully, I think, for those of you that thought it hit the left one. So hits the right arm here, extended away from the body. This is definitely a situation where we have to call a handball. On to the next one. We'll watch it one more time, although you guys, plenty of replays there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll. Let's see what you got. While everybody answers, we had a question here just to clarify, even if the hand was in a fully natural movement, but it was still extended outside the silhouette, it would still be a handball. The answer to that is yes, that is correct. Even if they're making a movement that might seem natural for running or jumping or whatever it is, if they've extended the arms outside of the silhouette of the body, then yes, we still need to have a handball. All right, most people have voted. And I'm happy to say that 93% of us say, yes, this is a handball, and that is correct. So again, I want you to think about, for the few people who thought this was in the natural silhouette, This might seem like a natural movement. It's a running movement maybe, but recognize that he's jumping to block a ball and he's putting his arm out away from the body. So again, if you ask yourself, is the arm away from the body and has the arm created a barrier? I think in both situations, the answer to this is clearly yes. The arm is out away from the body and he is creating a barrier so that the ball can't get past. If he has jumped with his arm out like his left arm is down to the side and tucked into the body. If his right arm had done the same thing, his arm would have been down, this ball would have passed, the barrier wouldn't have existed. So it's clear from this that this is not within the natural silhouette of the body. So well done on this one. On to the next one. One more time. All right, I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll again. The poll is open. A few more seconds. All right. So we're a little bit more divided on this one. So we had a handful of people say maybe, but do you take the goal away, et cetera, et cetera. We're not worried about that. We're not worried about the situation and whether or not we'd give advantage or we'd wait. That's a little bit more advanced concept for us. All we're trying to do is determine if we would call a handball or if an offense should be considered being guilty of a handball. So good questions to ask. We're not going to worry about it. We're going to just judge this for the potential handball offense that it is and leave it at that. So I think we can all admit that this is a tough decision to make. And really the answer comes down to, let me find a better replay here. The answer comes down to, should we consider this the natural silhouette of the body or not? So this is the moment it hits him. Clearly comes from short distance. The guy doesn't know anything about it. So the question you have to ask yourself is, did the arm create a barrier? And is the arm or the hand outside of the silhouette of the body? So again, we have to ask ourselves those two questions. So in this scenario, if we consider this to be the silhouette, I'm going to try something here. Apologize if I don't do this well, but I'm going to try it anyway. If we consider this to be the silhouette of the body, can everybody see the red drawing on there, I hope? If we consider that to be the silhouette of the body, is the hand outside of that silhouette? And if you answer yes, then it has to be a handball. So if this player jumps in to try to block this ball and he has his hand across his chest, so again, my bad drawing here, but if his arm is tucked in here like this, while he's jumping and it hits him there, we don't call a handball for that because his arm is tucked within his silhouette and it would have hit him in his body anyway if it hadn't hit the arm. In this scenario, we have it well outside the silhouette, which means we need to consider that a handball. We had another person, would it be more clear if we said silhouette of the trunk? Yes, the silhouette of the body is the trunk, the torso. I think we used the word torso earlier. So if the arm is tucked within here, then yes. If not, the answer is no. Now, if he has his arm tucked right next to his body like that, then again, we have their silhouette here, right? What we want to look for is there a gap between the body and the arm? So we've got a number of questions here. I'm going to turn off my, my drawing here. And I'm going to answer some questions because I know this one's a bit of a tough one. So we had a question here, what if the arm is by his body? We're going to see a video example of that in a few minutes. So I'm going to hold off on answering that one. So the question here, so the defenders can only have their arms or hands across their chest or behind their back? No, they can have their arms directly at their sides. So again, if his arm is right here, tucked in close to his body, we don't have a problem. But here, his arm is a good 6 to 8 inches away from his shoulder when he makes contact with the ball. This ball otherwise would go past this player where his hand not sticking out to the side. And that's what we have to worry about. So I said at the beginning of the webinar, we don't expect players to not have arms. We don't want them to cut their arms off. If they keep their arms close to their body, no problem whatsoever. But in this one, he's got his hands sticking out to the sides, a good 7, 8, 9 inches to the side, and that's why it hits the ball. So in this case, we would consider this not to be close to the body. We have a question here. He appears to be trying to move away from the ball. What he's trying to do, what his intention is irrelevant. We don't think about intent. We don't think about what he was trying to do. We think what actually happened. And in this situation, his hands are out to the sides and he blocked the ball. So therefore, we would need to call a handball. We had a question here. What if he moved to shield his hand or to use his hands to shield his face? If he was protecting his face, his hands and arms would be within the silhouette of his body. The head and the chest is the silhouette of the body, which means if he puts his hands up in front of his face to block his face, that is within the silhouette of his body. Now, if he sticks his hands way out in front of his arm or out in front of his face, if he extends his hands all the way out, then no, that's very, very different. But in this situation, if he's blocking his face, we don't worry about it. We have a person here who says a person physically can't jump high with the arms tucked in. This is not a player who's jumping. This player is not jumping. He is not off the ground. He's running to try to block, and he puts his hands up. So in this scenario, his arms are out away from the sides. We would want to call a handball. I know this is a tougher clip, so I'll move us along to hopefully one that will clarify that for us just a little bit here. Now this one you're only going to see from behind, but we'll get a good sense of what we're talking about. So we're going to be looking at the left arm, and I know that it's a little bit blurry. This is just the camera work on a quick game. So we're going to be really focused on the left arm here. So I'm going to pause it right there because that's really our moment of truth. And we're going to launch the poll. Few more seconds. While people finish up their voting, we had a question here from Khaled. But if a goal is scored, is it a goal when he's trying to cover his face or hands with still with his body? So Khaled, I'm going to ask you the same follow-up question. Are we talking about an attacker or a defender? If you can clarify that for me, are we talking about if this hits an attacker's hands and goes in the goal while protecting the face, or if it goes off of a defender's hands while protecting the face and into the goal? All right. So we had 73% of us say no handball. We had a comment here, both the silhouette and time to react are reasons not to award a foul. So Mr. Crawford, we've said a number of times on this call that the distance or the time to react is not a consideration that we use. We do not care about how far the ball traveled or how much time there was to react to it. The only considerations we care about are, did the arm create a barrier, and was the arm within the natural silhouette of the body? So the distance, the time to react, is irrelevant. We don't care about that. So this is a good example for those of you. We had 83% of us say that this is no handball because it's within the natural silhouette. That is correct. The arm is directly down by the side. So unlike the last clip where the player had stuck his hands out to the sides and up by his shoulders, this is a player who's got his arms directly down by his sides in a very, very natural position, tight within the body, and he doesn't have another place to put them. We do not want to force players to put their hands behind their back. We don't want to see them doing that. And so because this player has his arms directly down by his sides, they're not sticking out to the side, which you can tell just by the way his arm is hanging, that it's hanging down directly from his shoulder, that needs to be considered a natural silhouette. And we do not want to call a handball in this situation. Not because it comes from a close distance. We don't care about that. As we saw from the last one, which also came from a very close distance, if the hand is sticking out away from the body or away from the silhouette, then yes, we want to call a handball no matter how quick it was. Because putting your hands out to the sides like that, you're creating a risk for yourself, and it's an unfair way of making the body naturally bigger. But in this case, because his arms are down to the sides, we do not want to call a handball here. So I want to use this, and I'm going to go back to the last video we looked at so that you can compare the difference. Look at how his arm is directly down next to his side. And then if we go back and we look at this one, let's see if I can get to it here. Look how this player's arms are out away from the body. This is a crucial difference between this clip where we said handball and the next clip where we say no handball. If this player has his arms dangling down by his side and it hits it, no handball. But because he's raised them up, he has created a barrier and it's out away from his body, we say it's a handball. I hope those two videos clarify this a little bit better for us. Couple more here. Watch that one more time. That's our moment of truth. I'll go ahead and launch the poll. Few more seconds. All right. Here are the results. We had 86% say no, the hand is within the natural silhouette. And we had a handful of people say yes, this needs to be a handball. So when we talk about, I want to try to potentially help define this idea of silhouette, because some of the comments I'm seeing are suggesting somehow that because the elbow was bent, it's not within the silhouette. So I want to come back to a previous freeze frame here and hopefully help with this. I'm going to stop sharing. We had 86% say no handball here. So I'm gonna try to draw again, see how well I do. So again, if we talk about the natural silhouette of the body, give me a second here to try my drawing skills. This is the natural silhouette of the body. So we have to ask ourselves, is his arm within that silhouette? And if the answer is yes, then we're not going to call a handball. So if we draw this silhouette, even though his arm is bent, his arm is still tucked in close tight to his body and is not making his body bigger, and it's not outside the silhouette of his body. So this is a good example where we have a silhouette and we have an arm that's within that silhouette. So we do not want to call a handball here. If I move forward a little bit to the next one, or sorry, to the next replay, you can see he's got his arm tucked tight into his body. There's nowhere else for him to put his arm aside from behind his back, which is something we don't want to force players to do. So he keeps his arm deliberately tight to his body, pressed into his stomach, and the ball hits him in the arm while it's pressed into the stomach. When you see a player do that, try to keep the ball or try to keep the arms tucked tight to the body. Then you don't want to punish them for that. It's not their fault they were born with arms. They can't do anything about it. So don't look to punish them unless they stick those arms way out to the side. So we had a question here. The natural silhouette is also dependent on the 3D view. From a 2D perspective, the arm is within. So you're getting a lot more complicated than you need to here. Does he tuck his arms in tight to the body? And the answer is yes. He tucks it tight into the body. This ball would have hit him in the chest if it hadn't hit the arm instead. That's another good way to think about it. If the ball would have hit the player in their torso, were it not for the arm, maybe we don't call a handball because the player's arms are tucked into the torso. Now, somebody asked if this had hit his other hand back here away from his body. Absolutely. If it hits here, then yes, this is a handball. But because it hits the arm that's tucked in tight to the body, we don't need to worry about that. So Mr. Kilpatrick is arguing still that this hits the elbow. Yeah, it hits the elbow, but the elbow is tucked in directly next to the body. He can't put his arm anywhere else to keep it away from it. So because he's got it tucked into his body, we don't want to call that. If he's trying to keep his arm tight to his body, we don't want to punish someone for handball. Now, again, if it hits this hand out here, absolutely, because this is out away from the body. But if a hand stays in tight to the body, and let's be honest, if this ball doesn't hit his elbow, it hits him in the ribs or it hits him in the shoulder, it hits him in his torso otherwise, that's a good indicator that his arm was tucked into his torso, and we don't want to call a foul there. So I think we're trying to overcomplicate here. The arm is tucked into the body. This is not a handball here. Now, somebody asked, what if this was the attacker? Absolutely a handball. It's completely unfair to attackers, but that's the case. If this is the attacker, if this black player is the attacker, yes, this is a handball. But because it's not an attacker, it is a defender, this is not a handball. Okay, moving on. Somebody asked why, because that's the way the laws of the game are written. So guys, I'm going to stop us here. These comments and these questions are getting a little bit ridiculous. What if the arm is chicken winged and the elbow could be said to be outside the silhouette? Nobody on this call is going to be able to perceive that in real time anyway. Let's be honest. And so let's make this nice and simple. If a player keeps their arm tucked close to their body, don't call a handball. If they stick their arms out to the sides, call a handball. This is clearly an example of someone keeping their arm in tight, close to the body. We don't want to punish that. It's really that simple, folks. All right, we'll look at one more, and then we'll be done for the evening. One more time in real time with the replay. So we're going to be watching this player right here. One more time. All right, I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll. So while people are voting, somebody said if the ball hits an attacker anywhere on the arm or hand, regardless of being tucked in, it's a handball. That is correct. That was a result of the change in the laws of the game this year. FIFA did not want goals being scored or attacking or promising attacks being created as a result of a handball, even if it was accidental. So when attackers, particularly in the attacking third, have the ball hit their hand, even if it's on accident, we have to call a handball. That's the expectation per the laws of the game now. So that's a new law change, and it creates two categories of handball in my mind. There's handballs against attackers, which is anytime it touches the hand, you blow the whistle, or it's a defender. So in this case, this is a defender who touches the ball. The dark player takes the shot. The defensive team is the red team. And I'm happy to say 91% of us say this is no handball, and that is correct. So the reason that this is not a handball is very obviously the hand is right next to the body, and you can see it right here, right before it hits his hand. He's got his arm just sitting next to his body. It's actually tucked into his body here. The ball comes, hits the hand while it's tucked in next to the body. Definitely not a handball. And you actually see if you play it through the rest of the way, he's got his hands tucked behind him. He was actually trying to get his hands out of the way. So something to be looking for. As you can see, the arm is tucked in tight to the body. And when it hits the hand, boom. So question here, I thought the prohibition on the ball hitting attackers' hands or arms only applied if a goal scoring chance ensues, not any attacker. That is correct, but the guidance that we're being given from the very top level is basically anytime it hits an attacker's hand in the attacking third and they keep possession of the ball, that is an attacking opportunity being created. So it's going to be simpler to blow the whistle. In and around the penalty area, if it hits an attacker's hand, just blow the whistle. That's going to be the simplest thing to do. So to wrap up, I'm going to skip ahead a couple. I want to remind ourselves what those considerations were we talked about from the very beginning. We're talking about scenarios where the hand and the arm has made their body unnaturally bigger. The big considerations, creating a barrier for the ball, the hand or the arm is outside the normal playing silhouette, and distance doesn't matter. So take a moment, screenshot this, take a picture, do whatever you need to do of your screen so that you can take away these three considerations because they're crucial for this. Creating a barrier, hand or the arm outside the normal playing silhouette, and the distance simply doesn't matter. All right. Any questions? We have 3 more minutes. I'm happy to answer questions. For those of you that have been asking all night, we usually only go an hour from 7 to 8 o'clock. So thank you for joining. I'll stick around until 8 o'clock. If anybody has any questions, I am happy to answer them. Yes, we always post these on YouTube. So within a day or two, it will be on YouTube. Couple of people asking when these happen. We do 2 sessions a month for the grassroots referees. There will be the one today, and then there's one a week from today as well. So we do 2 times a month. All right. Thanks, everybody, and have a good night.